I checked my watch for the third time as Mr. Donovan maneuvered his sleek BMW through unfamiliar streets. Shortcut, he'd explained when we exited the highway, miles before our intended exit. The client meeting, my first major presentation since my promotion, was scheduled to start in 40 minutes, but the surroundings growing increasingly residential made me uneasy. "Are you sure this is the right way?" I asked, clutching my portfolio tighter. He smiled, briefly taking his eyes off the road to look at me. "Trust me, Rebecca," he said, his confident tone at odds with the GPS rerouting notification blinking on the dashboard. When he pulled into the parking lot of what appeared to be a small hotel rather than the office complex we were meant to visit, I felt a flutter of confusion. "What about the Westbrook meeting?" I asked, my voice barely audible as he turned off the engine. His response made my breath catch, the implications of his words settling between us in the sudden silence. The email arrived at 4:47 p.m. on a Friday, just as I was mentally checking out for the weekend. Subject line: Clearwater deal, need you in Chicago. Sender: Nathan Holbrook, Executive Creative Director and my direct superior for the past 11 months. My heart skipped a beat as I clicked it open. Megan, James is out with the flu. I need you to fill in and join me for the Clearwater pitch in Chicago on Monday. Flight leaves tomorrow evening. Details to follow. I read it 3 times, unable to process the implications. James Chen was our senior marketing strategist. I was a mid-level coordinator who had never led a major client presentation before. And Nathan Holbrook was, well, he was Nathan Holbrook. The creative genius who had transformed Archer and Walsh from a mid-tier agency to an industry leader in under 5 years. The man whose approval everyone sought but few received. My name is Megan Collins, 28 years old, and for nearly a year I'd been working 60-hour weeks trying to get Nathan to remember my name. Now he was taking me to pitch our biggest potential client of the year. "Holy shit," I whispered, staring at my screen. "What's up?" asked Zoe from the adjacent desk, glancing up from her own end-of-week reports. I turned my laptop so she could see the email. Her eyes widened as she read it. "Chicago? With Holbrook? Just the 2 of you?" Each question rose higher in pitch. "Apparently," I replied, the reality slowly sinking in. "It has to be a mistake, right? He meant to email someone else." Zoe shook her head. "He doesn't make mistakes like that. If he asked for you, he wants you." The phrase sent an unexpected flutter through my stomach. But why me? I'd barely had any interaction with him. It was true. Despite reporting to Nathan technically, his busy schedule and my junior position meant our exchanges were limited to group meetings and the occasional hallway nod. "Remember that McKinley sports campaign last month? I heard he was impressed with your strategy deck." Zoe leaned closer, lowering her voice. "This could be huge for you, Megan. If you impress him on this trip, you could skip 2 years of corporate ladder climbing." As if summoned by our conversation, another email arrived, flight confirmation, hotel reservation, and a brief outline of what Nathan expected me to prepare by tomorrow evening. Panic set in as I scanned the extensive list. "There's no way I can get all this done by tomorrow." "Then you better cancel your weekend plans," Zoe said, already turning back to her computer. "This is your shot. Don't waste it." I nodded numbly, already mentally cataloging what I needed to do. Research Clearwater's competitors. Review their previous campaigns. Prepare market analysis slides. The weekend I'd planned to spend binge-watching Netflix and ignoring my recent breakup had just transformed into a career-defining crunch session. As I gathered my things to head home and start working, my phone buzzed with a text message. "My office. Now." Nathan never texted me. I didn't even know he had my number. With shaking hands, I smoothed my skirt, grabbed my notebook, and headed toward the corner office where Nathan Holbrook ruled his creative kingdom. As I approached, I could see him through the glass walls, pacing as he talked on the phone. Tall, with dark hair going slightly silver at the temples, he had the kind of presence that commanded attention without effort. At 42, he was at the peak of his career, known for both brilliant creative direction and uncompromising standards. He gestured for me to enter without interrupting his call. I slipped inside, clutching my notebook like a shield, and waited for whatever came next. Make sure to subscribe to my channel so I can continue bringing you more fascinating true stories like this one, and don't forget to watch this video till the end and like the video because this story is going to be incredibly interesting. Please hit the like button to show your support. I've never been the kind of person who gets handed opportunities. Everything I've achieved has been through relentless work and careful planning. Growing up in a small Ohio town with parents who viewed college as an unnecessary luxury meant I'd funded my own education through scholarships and 3 simultaneous jobs. The marketing degree from state wasn't prestigious, but it was mine, earned through sheer determination. Landing the position at Archer and Walsh 11 months ago had felt like finally breaking through. After 3 years at smaller agencies where I was perpetually undervalued and underpaid, A&W represented the big leagues. The salary increase allowed me to rent an apartment without roommates for the first time, a tiny studio, but mine alone. The breakup with Daniel 3 weeks ago had been another setback. After 2 years together, he'd decided he needed space to find himself, which apparently involved finding himself in the bed of his yoga instructor. I'd thrown myself into work even more intensely since then, using exhaustion as a shield against heartbreak, and now, somehow, I was standing in Nathan Holbrook's office as he finished his phone call, wondering if I was about to be handed a career-making opportunity or set up for spectacular failure. "Megan Collins," Nathan said as he hung up, studying me with an intensity that made me straighten my posture automatically. "You prepared the McKinley Sports Strategy deck, correct?" "Yes, sir," I confirmed, surprised he knew that. I'd worked on dozens of projects, but that one had been my favorite, a campaign targeting female athletes that challenged industry stereotypes. "Good work. Innovative approach." The compliment was delivered matter-of-factly, as if he were commenting on the weather. "That's why you're coming to Chicago." "Thank you for the opportunity," I said carefully. "But I should mention I've never led a pitch this size before." "I'm aware of your experience level." He leaned against his desk, arms crossed. "Clearwater wants fresh perspectives. Something different from the standard corporate approach. Your McKinley work showed that kind of thinking." I nodded, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. "I'll have everything prepared by tomorrow evening." "You'll have it ready by noon." "We'll review on the flight." His tone left no room for negotiation. "This pitch is crucial, Megan. Clearwater could be a $20 million account." The pressure of his expectations settled on my shoulders like a physical weight. Nathan Holbrook was a legend in advertising for good reason. Before founding A&W's creative department, he'd worked at top agencies in New York and London, creating campaigns that had transformed struggling brands into industry leaders. His work had won every major award, and he'd been featured in Marketing Week's 40 Under 40 list before most people even established their careers. He was also known for his exacting standards and intolerance for mediocrity. 3 creatives had quit the agency in tears after presenting work he deemed subpar. His feedback was brutally honest but invariably correct, which made it impossible to dismiss. What most people didn't see, what I'd only glimpsed in rare moments during all-hands meetings, was the passion behind his demanding nature. Nathan cared about the work in a way few people did. He believed advertising could be art, could change perceptions and challenge norms. It wasn't just business to him, it was a calling. This was the man I'd be spending 3 days with in Chicago. The man who could make or break my career with a single word of praise or criticism. The man who, for reasons I couldn't fully understand, had selected me for this opportunity. "I won't let you down," I promised, meaning it with every fiber of my being. Something like approval flickered in his eyes. "See that you don't. Now go home and start working. I'll email you additional materials within the hour." As I turned to leave, he added, "And Megan? Pack for variable weather. Chicago is unpredictable this time of year." It was such an unexpectedly personal comment, a practical consideration for my comfort, that I momentarily lost my professional composure. Yes, of course. Thank you. Walking back to my desk, I felt like I was floating somewhere between terror and exhilaration. In less than 24 hours, I'd be on a plane with Nathan Holbrook, flying toward what could be either my greatest professional triumph or my most humiliating failure. Either way, nothing would be the same after this trip. Archer and Walsh operated like most creative agencies, a carefully calibrated ecosystem where talent, ego, and ambition coexisted in tenuous balance. The office itself reflected this dynamic: open-concept workspaces for most staff, glass-walled offices for department heads, and Nathan's corner domain with its stunning view of the city. The news of my unexpected trip with Nathan spread through the agency with unsettling speed. By Saturday morning, when I arrived to work on the Clearwater presentation, I'd received 12 texts from colleagues ranging from congratulatory to suspicious. "Everything okay?" asked Marcus, our office manager, as I badged into the unusually quiet weekend space. "Got your travel authorization form. Chicago with the big boss, huh?" "James is sick," I explained, not wanting to seem like I was bragging. "I'm just filling in." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Sure. Except Nathan specifically requested you on the form. Not James's replacement but Megan Collins." I didn't know how to respond to that, so I just smiled awkwardly and headed to my desk, where I spent the next 7 hours buried in research and slide preparation. Around 3 p.m., Diane from the strategy team appeared beside me, coffee in hand. At 45, Diane had been at the agency longest and knew its inner workings better than anyone. "Take a break," she said, setting the coffee beside me. "You look like you're about to implode." I gratefully accepted the caffeine. "Thanks. I'm just trying to get everything perfect before tomorrow." "Smart." She perched on the edge of my desk. "Nathan doesn't tolerate mistakes. But that's not why I'm here." "Oh?" I took a sip of coffee, waiting. "You should know what you're walking into," she said, lowering her voice though the office was nearly empty. "Nathan's brilliant, but he's complicated. Especially on business trips." "What do you mean?" "He gets intense. Focused to the point of obsession. Forgets that normal humans need things like food and sleep." She studied me with motherly concern. "And he has high expectations, especially for women." Something in her tone made me pause. "High expectations how?" "Not like that," Diane clarified quickly. "Nothing inappropriate. But he expects women to be twice as prepared, twice as sharp as their male counterparts. His mother was one of the first female creative directors in New York. He was raised with certain standards." I nodded, somewhat relieved. "I can handle high expectations." "I'm sure you can. Just..." She hesitated. "Be careful with personal boundaries. The line between professional and personal gets blurry on business trips. Especially when things don't go according to plan." Before I could ask what she meant, my phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. "Where are we on the competitive analysis?" "He's here?" I glanced toward his office, which appeared dark. "Working remotely," Diane explained. "But always watching. I'll let you get back to it." After she left, I returned to my presentation with renewed determination, but Diane's warnings lingered. What had she meant about boundaries and plans going awry? Around 7 p.m., as I was finalizing the last slides, James Chin called. His voice was hoarse from his flu, but his message was clear. "Megan, listen carefully. Nathan picked you for a reason. He sees something in your work, but he'll test you. Push you. Don't take it personally." "I won't," I assured him. "Any specific advice?" James coughed before continuing. "Don't try to impress him with industry jargon. He hates that. Just be straightforward and believe in your ideas. And one more thing." "What's that?" "If the Marriott offers an upgrade to the concierge level, take it. The regular rooms have terrible water pressure." I laughed, tension momentarily broken. "Noted. Thanks, James. Don't thank me yet. Nathan on a business trip is..." He trailed off, coughing again. "Let's just say it's an experience." As I packed up my materials that evening, I couldn't help but wonder what exactly I was walking into. Every conversation about the trip had carried undercurrents of warning, as if my colleagues were trying to prepare me for something beyond a standard business presentation. Tomorrow would bring answers, but tonight I had 12 more hours of preparation ahead. Whatever Nathan Holbrook expected from me, I was determined to exceed it, no matter what experience awaited me in Chicago. The ride to the airport was excruciating. Nathan insisted on driving, which left me sitting in the passenger seat of his sleek Audi, acutely aware of every movement, every silence, every accidental brush of elbows when he shifted gears. The man who commanded meeting rooms with effortless authority now seemed almost awkward in this confined space, as if he too was adjusting to our sudden proximity outside the office hierarchy. "Your presentation materials?" he asked as we merged onto the highway. "All here," I replied, patting my laptop bag. "Finished the competitive analysis at 2 a.m. He glanced at me, one eyebrow raised. "You worked all night?" I wanted it to be thorough. I didn't mention the 3 Red Bulls that had fueled my final push. "Dedication is admirable," he said after a pause. "But a sleep-deprived mind makes mistakes. Remember that." The correction, gentle as it was, made me flush with embarrassment. Not even an hour into the trip, and I'd already revealed my amateur desperation. We drove in silence for several miles, the tension thickening until Nathan unexpectedly turned down the stereo system that had been softly playing classical music. "Tell me about your background, Megan. Your file says Ohio State University?" The question caught me off guard. In 11 months, Nathan had never shown interest in my personal history. "Yes. Marketing major, graphic design minor. First in your family to attend college," he noted, eyes still on the road. Not a question, but a statement of fact. I stared at him, surprised. "You read my HR file?" The corner of his mouth twitched. "I read everyone's file when they're hired. I remember details." "Yes, I was first generation," I confirmed, unsure where this was going. "Worked 3 jobs through school." Nathan nodded as if I'd confirmed something important. "That explains your work ethic. It's refreshing." The compliment, delivered in his matter-of-fact tone, felt more genuine than effusive praise would have from anyone else. I found myself sharing more than I'd intended. Growing up watching my parents struggle paycheck to paycheck was motivation enough. I never wanted that life. "And now?" he asked. "What motivates you now?" The question felt loaded, as if my answer might be measured against some hidden standard. "Excellence," I said finally. "Doing work that matters." A hint of a smile. "Not money? Career advancement?" "Those too," I admitted. "But they follow naturally from excellent work." "In theory," he replied, a slight edge entering his voice. "Reality is often more political." Before I could ask what he meant, his phone rang through the car's Bluetooth. "Holbrook," he answered sharply. I stared out the window as he discussed production timelines for another client project, grateful for the respite from our unexpectedly personal conversation. Outside, dark clouds were gathering on the horizon, a storm front moving in that hadn't been in the forecast. At the airport, we discovered our flight was delayed by 2 hours due to incoming weather. Nathan's jaw tightened at the news, but he simply nodded and led the way to the first-class lounge, another new experience for me. "We'll use the time," he said, selecting a quiet corner with 2 chairs. "Show me what you've prepared." For the next hour, I walked him through my presentation while he listened with unnerving intensity, occasionally stopping me to dig deeper on specific points. His questions were incisive, exposing weak spots in my analysis I hadn't recognized. "Rework slides 7 through 12, he finally said. "Your competitive positioning lacks bite." I nodded, opening my laptop immediately, determined to prove myself. "Later," he said, closing my laptop gently. "First, eat something. You're no use to me if you collapse from exhaustion." The surprising consideration behind his brusque words caught me off guard once again. As he went to order food for both of us, I found myself watching him move through the crowded lounge, confident, commanding, But with the underlying tension I'd never noticed in the office, this trip was revealing sides of Nathan Holbrook I hadn't known existed, making him simultaneously more human and more intimidating. Our flight finally boarded 3 hours late, the delay extending beyond the initial estimate as the storm intensified. By the time we settled into our first-class seats, another first for me, it was nearly 11 p.m., and we'd been in each other's company for over 7 hours. "Try to sleep," Nathan advised as we taxied. "We'll land around 1 a.m., and tomorrow will be a long day." "I should finish the revisions first," I protested, reaching for my laptop. He shook his head. "You can't produce quality work when you're running on fumes. Rest now, work in the morning." The firm instruction, delivered with what almost sounded like concern, made me realize how exhausted I truly was. I nodded gratefully and leaned back, closing my eyes as the plane accelerated down the runway. I must have fallen asleep immediately because the next thing I knew, the plane was shuddering through turbulence, and something warm was pressed against my shoulder. I opened my eyes to discover I had slumped sideways in my sleep, directly onto Nathan's shoulder. I jerked upright, mortified. "I'm so sorry." "You were tired," he said simply, no judgment in his voice. His usual perfect composure seemed slightly rumpled after hours of travel, his tie loosened and a hint of stubble darkening his jaw. The effect was disconcertingly human. The plane shook again, more violently this time. Outside the window, lightning flashed through dense clouds. "Bad storm," Nathan remarked, glancing at his watch with a frown. "We're still an hour out from Chicago." The cabin lights flickered, and the captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some unexpected severe weather. I've turned on the fasten seatbelt sign. Please return to your seats immediately." Nathan's hand suddenly covered mine where it gripped the armrest, a brief, steadying pressure that disappeared so quickly I almost thought I'd imagined it. "Not a fan of turbulence?" he asked, his voice lower than usual. "Is anyone?" I tried to smile, but another violent shake of the plane transformed it into a grimace. "I find it helpful to focus on something else," he suggested, eyes still on mine. "Tell me about your McKinley sports concept. What inspired the approach?" Grateful for the distraction, I began explaining my thinking behind the campaign that had apparently caught his attention. As the plane bucked and trembled around us, our conversation deepened, moving from marketing strategy to broader perspectives on gender representation in advertising. "Most agencies claim to want fresh perspectives," Nathan said, "but they really want safe variations on proven formulas. Your concept actually challenged assumptions. Is that why you selected it?" I asked. "Because it wasn't safe?" "I selected it because it was true," he replied, holding my gaze with unexpected intensity. "Good advertising tells the truth in a way people haven't heard before." There was conviction in his voice, a glimpse of the passion that drove his demanding standards. I found myself leaning slightly closer, drawn by his rare moment of openness. "Ladies and gentlemen." The captain's voice interrupted the moment. "Due to severe weather conditions at O'Hare, we've been diverted to Madison, Wisconsin. We apologize for the inconvenience." A collective groan went up from the cabin. Nathan's expression darkened as he checked his phone. "Madison is over 100 miles from Chicago," he said, jaw tight with frustration. "The Clearwater meeting is at 2 p.m. tomorrow. We can still make it, right?" I asked. "Rent a car in the morning?" Nathan didn't answer immediately, typing rapidly on his phone. "Depends on the storm," he finally said. "Forecast doesn't look promising." As we began our descent into Madison, I realized that the business trip I'd prepared so meticulously for was already veering off course. What I couldn't possibly know was how completely our careful plans were about to unravel, or how the boundaries between boss and employee would soon be tested in ways neither of us anticipated. Madison Airport at 1:30 a.m. was a special kind of purgatory. Hundreds of stranded passengers crowded the terminal, all seeking the same scarce resources: rental cars, hotel rooms, any way out of airport limbo. Nathan immediately took charge, moving us efficiently through the crowd to the rental car counter while making calls to adjust our plans. "Bad news," he said, rejoining me after speaking with the rental agent. Every car is booked. There's a major medical conference in town, and the storm has brought everyone here. I nodded, fatigue making it difficult to process the implications. Hotel options? Working on it. His expression was grim as he scrolled through his phone. Same problem. Everything near the airport is fully booked. My heart sank. Were we going to be sleeping in the terminal? After several tense minutes, Nathan's posture relaxed slightly. Found one room at a lodge about 30 miles from here, he said. Not ideal, but it's our only option unless you prefer these chairs. He gestured to the uncomfortable airport seating. One room? I repeated, instantly alert despite my exhaustion. Nathan met my eyes directly. One room, 2 beds. If that makes you uncomfortable, I'll sleep in the lobby. Your choice. The straightforward way he addressed the potential impropriety helped ease my concern. This was a crisis situation, not a romantic comedy setup. 2 beds is fine, I said firmly. How do we get there? They have a shuttle, but it's not running this late. I've arranged a private car. An hour later, we were checking into Pine Lake Lodge, a rustic retreat that would have been charming under different circumstances. As promised, our room had 2 queen beds separated by a nightstand, professionally appropriate, if unusually intimate for a boss and employee. Take whichever bed you prefer, Nathan said, setting down his bag. Bathroom's all yours first. I nodded gratefully and retreated with my overnight bag, taking the opportunity to collect myself in private. The face in the mirror looked exhausted but also strangely exhilarated. 24 hours ago, I'd been just another employee at Archer and Walsh. Now I was sharing a hotel room with Nathan Holbrook in the middle of nowhere, Wisconsin. When I emerged in sweatpants and a Chicago Bears t-shirt, the most modest sleepwear I'd packed, I found Nathan standing at the window, phone pressed to his ear. He'd removed his tie and jacket, his white dress shirt partially unbuttoned at the collar. It was the most casual I'd ever seen him, and the effect was disconcertingly human. Yes, I understand, he was saying, tension evident in his voice. But we're literally stranded by an act of God. No, that's not acceptable. He ended the call with a barely suppressed curse. Problem? I asked. Clearwater won't reschedule, he said, running a hand through his usually perfect hair. The CEO is leaving for Asia tomorrow night. If we're not there by 2 p.m., we lose the pitch. The weight of this disaster settled on my shoulders. All my careful preparation, the career opportunity, vanishing because of a random storm. The forecast? I asked, though his expression already told me everything. Storm intensifying. Roads likely closed until tomorrow afternoon. We're not making it to Chicago in time. The finality in his voice triggered something unexpected in me, not resignation, but determination. Then we pitch from here, I said. Nathan looked at me like I'd suggested flying there on magic carpets. What? Virtual pitch. We have our decks, we have our laptops. We request a Zoom call instead. Clearwater specifically requested an in-person presentation, he pointed out. They're old school. What's more old school than adapting to survive? I countered. We show them we can overcome any obstacle to serve their needs. That's the ultimate pitch. Nathan stared at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then something shifted in his eyes, respect, maybe even admiration. Make the case, he said. Convince me like you would convince them. Heart pounding, exhaustion forgotten, I launched into an impromptu presentation about flexibility and resilience as brand values. I was pitching not just a virtual meeting, but a new approach to our relationship with Clearwater. As I finished, Nathan's face broke into the first genuine smile I'd ever seen from him. Call their executive assistant, he said. First thing in the morning. We're pitching virtually. In that moment, something fundamental changed between us. I was no longer just his subordinate, I was his partner in this crisis. The hierarchy that had defined our relationship at the office had been irrevocably altered by circumstance and my willingness to challenge his assumptions. Neither of us could have predicted how this shift would affect everything that followed. Sleep eluded me despite my exhaustion. The soft sound of Nathan's breathing from the other bed, the unfamiliar room, and the enormity of tomorrow's challenge kept my mind racing. I'd volunteered us for a virtual pitch we weren't prepared for, with a client who specifically requested in-person presentations. If we failed, it would be directly because of my suggestion. Around 3 a.m., I gave up on sleep and quietly slipped out of bed, retrieving my laptop. The small desk by the window would have to serve as my workstation. As the screen's glow illuminated the room, I began reworking our presentation for a virtual format. "Can't sleep either?" Nathan's voice startled me. I turned to find him sitting up in bed, watching me with an inscrutable expression. "Just adapting the presentation," I explained in a whisper, though there was no one else to disturb. Without a word, he got up and pulled the other chair beside me at the small desk. In a t-shirt and pajama pants, hair slightly mussed from bed, he looked nothing like the intimidating executive from the office. This Nathan was approachable, almost vulnerable. "Show me what you're thinking," he said, his voice rough with sleep. For the next hour, we worked side by side in the dim light, our shoulders occasionally brushing as we leaned toward the screen. The physical proximity created an intimacy that would have been unthinkable in the office, yet here it felt natural, necessary. We were no longer boss and employee but collaborators united against a common challenge. As we worked, I became increasingly aware of Nathan not as my superior but as a man, the subtle scent of his cologne lingering hours after application, the way his forehead creased when he concentrated, how his hand brushed mine when we both reached for the trackpad. "You're good at this," he said suddenly, leaning back in his chair. "Adapting under pressure. Most people would be panicking." "I'm definitely panicking," I admitted with a small laugh. "Just internally." His eyes studied me with unexpected warmth. "Don't. You're handling this better than people with twice your experience." The compliment sent a wave of pleasure through me that felt distinctly unprofessional. I looked away, confused by my reaction. This was Nathan Holbrook, my boss, a man known for his exacting standards and emotional detachment. Why did his approval affect me so strongly? "We should try to sleep," I said, closing the laptop. "Big day tomorrow." Nathan nodded but made no move to return to his bed. "Megan," he said, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "Thank you." Most of my team would have given up when the flight was diverted. "I'm not most of your team," I replied, the words slipping out before I could consider them. "No," he agreed, holding my gaze. "You're not." Something unspoken passed between us in that moment, acknowledgement of a connection that transcended our professional relationship. The air seemed to thicken, charged with possibility. I broke the eye contact first, standing abruptly. "Good night, Nathan." Back in my bed, I stared at the ceiling, my heart pounding for reasons I didn't want to examine. I'd spent months seeing Nathan exclusively as my boss, a career gatekeeper whose approval I sought for professional advancement. When had that shifted to something more complicated? The storm that had diverted our plane still raged outside, wind howling against the windows of our shared room. But the real turbulence was inside me, where professional ambition warred with a growing personal attraction that could derail everything I'd worked for. James had warned that Nathan on a business trip was an experience. What he hadn't mentioned was how that experience might change the way I saw not just Nathan, but myself and my carefully constructed career plans. As sleep finally claimed me, one thought lingered: some boundaries, once crossed, can never be restored. Morning arrived with blinding white light pouring through the windows. Sometime during the night, the storm had transformed from rain to snow, leaving the landscape buried under at least a foot of pristine powder. It was beautiful, and completely disastrous for our travel plans. I found Nathan already awake, on the phone by the window. His expression confirmed what the snow had already told me: we weren't going anywhere soon. "All major roads closed," he reported after ending the call. "They're saying at least until tomorrow." I nodded, processing this new complication. "And Clearwater?" "Executive assistant is checking if the CEO can do a video call. We should know within the hour." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I now recognized as his tell for stress. Lodge has a business center we can use if they agree. After quick turns in the bathroom, we headed downstairs to find the small lodge had transformed into a hub of stranded travelers. The dining room was packed, the front desk besieged by people seeking information about road conditions. "Let me handle this," Nathan said, approaching the harried manager with the confident authority that typically cleared his path. Within minutes, he'd secured us not just breakfast but guaranteed access to the business center. "Impressive," I commented as we settled at a small table with coffee and omelets. "Just efficient negotiation," he shrugged, but I could see he was pleased by my recognition. As we ate, Nathan's phone rang with the call we'd been waiting for. I watched his expression closely, trying to interpret the one-sided conversation. When he hung up, his face was unreadable. "They've agreed to a video pitch," he said. "But they moved it up. 1 hour from now." My stomach dropped. "An hour? We're not ready." "We will be," he said with calm certainty. "Finish eating. We need to set up." The lodge's business center proved to be a converted storage room with spotty Wi-Fi and a single ancient computer. Clearly, it wouldn't suffice for our needs. "Plan B," Nathan declared, surveying the space. "My room has the best lighting and the strongest Wi-Fi signal. We'll set up there." Back in our room, we transformed the space with remarkable efficiency. The desk became our presentation station, with my laptop positioned to capture both of us in frame. A lamp was repurposed for better lighting, and a white bedsheet pinned to the wall created a neutral background. As we worked side by side in urgent preparation, the hierarchy between us dissolved completely. I found myself directing Nathan as often as he guided me, our collaboration fluid and intuitive. With 10 minutes to spare, we were ready, or as ready as possible under the circumstances. "We can do this," Nathan said, straightening his tie as we prepared to join the video call. Without thinking, I reached up to adjust his slightly crooked collar. The moment my fingers brushed against his neck, I realized my error. This small, intimate gesture crossed the invisible boundary between professional and personal. I started to pull back, an apology forming on my lips, but Nathan caught my hand in his. For one breathless moment, we stood frozen in this unexpected connection, his fingers warm around mine. "Megan," he said softly, my name a question. The ringing of my laptop shattered the moment. Clearwater calling for our pitch. We sprang apart, professional masks sliding back into place as I accepted the call with hands that weren't quite steady. For the next 40 minutes, we presented seamlessly to Clearwater's executive team, our earlier connection channeled into dynamic professional synergy. If anyone noticed the charged energy between us, they didn't comment on it. By all appearances, we were simply well-matched colleagues making the best of difficult circumstances. When the call ended, with Clearwater impressed by both our adaptability and our campaign concepts, Nathan turned to me with a smile that transformed his usually serious face. "We did it," he said, the exhilaration of success temporarily overshadowing the moment we'd shared before the call. "We did," I agreed, relief flooding through me. Without warning, Nathan pulled me into a hug, a spontaneous celebration between colleagues that should have been simple, professional. But as his arms encircled me, as I felt the solid warmth of him against me, I knew we'd crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, and neither of us seemed in a hurry to step back. The hug lasted seconds longer than any professional embrace should. When we finally separated, the atmosphere had changed irrevocably. Nathan's eyes held mine, a question in them I wasn't sure I was ready to answer. "That was," he began. "Inappropriate?" I suggested, attempting to defuse the tension with humor. "I was going to say unexpected," he replied, his voice lower than usual. "But not unwelcome." "Unless, not unwelcome," I confirmed softly, surprising myself with my honesty. A knock at the door interrupted whatever might have followed. The lodge manager stood outside with news. The main roads would remain closed until at least the following afternoon, but the smaller local roads were being cleared. Clearwater had already emailed, they wanted to move forward with our agency pending final proposal details. "We should celebrate," Nathan said after the manager left. "Limited options in a snowbound lodge, but I'm sure they have something resembling champagne." Is that wise? I asked, the question encompassing far more than just alcohol. Nathan understood my meaning immediately. Probably not, he acknowledged. But we've already crossed several lines of professional propriety by necessity. One celebratory drink seems harmless in comparison. His rationalization aligned with my own desire to extend this strange interlude before reality reasserted itself. One drink, I agreed. In the lodge's half-empty restaurant, we found a quiet corner table and ordered a bottle of sparkling wine. As we toasted our successful pitch, I studied Nathan across the table, seeing him with new clarity. Outside the office environment, away from the power dynamics that usually defined our interactions, different facets of his personality emerged: warmth, humor, vulnerability beneath the confident exterior. Tell me something I wouldn't know from your HR file, he said, refilling our glasses. I laughed, relaxing into the personal conversation. I competed in ballroom dancing through college. Now that I wouldn't have guessed, he said, smiling. Any other hidden talents? I speak passable Mandarin. My roommate was Chinese. I leaned forward. Your turn. Tell me something not in your corporate bio. I nearly became an architect, he said after a moment's consideration. Had a scholarship and everything. What happened? My mother got sick my freshman year. Cancer. His expression sobered. I dropped out to care for her, started working in advertising as a production assistant to pay the bills. By the time she recovered, I'd found my calling. The personal revelation touched me. I'm sorry about your mother. Is she still going strong at 70, he confirmed. Quite proud of what her dropout son accomplished. As afternoon stretched into evening, our conversation wandered through increasingly personal territory. The professional boundaries we'd maintained for months dissolved, replaced by genuine connection between two people discovering unexpected compatibility. We should probably discuss what happens when we get back, Nathan said eventually, acknowledging the elephant in the room. This situation, us, here, it's exceptional circumstances. A snow bubble, I agreed, grateful he'd broached the subject. Not real life. Not real life, he echoed, though something in his expression suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. When we return to the office, we need to maintain professional boundaries. Absolutely, I said quickly. What happens in Wisconsin stays in Wisconsin. The promise felt both necessary and slightly disappointing. Whatever was developing between us couldn't survive in the hierarchical environment of Archer and Walsh, where he was my direct superior and I was still proving myself. That said, Nathan continued, his eyes holding mine across the table, we're still in Wisconsin until tomorrow at least. The implication in his words sent warmth spreading through me that had nothing to do with the wine. So we are, I agreed softly. We lingered over dinner, both seemingly reluctant to end this temporary reprieve from reality. When we finally returned to our shared room, an unspoken tension filled the space, the knowledge that tomorrow would re-establish the professional distance we'd agreed was necessary. Good night, Megan, Nathan said as we prepared for sleep, his voice carrying a weight of things unsaid. Good night, I replied, equally laden with subtext. As I lay in bed listening to his breathing across the darkened room, I wondered if our snow bubble agreement would hold once we returned to real life, or if, like the storm that had diverted us to this place, some forces simply couldn't be contained by good intentions and professional boundaries. Morning arrived with improved weather and news that the main highway to Chicago would reopen by noon. Our unexpected detour was coming to an end, but I found myself strangely reluctant to leave the intimate bubble we'd created in this snowbound lodge. Nathan and I shared breakfast in comfortable silence, both acutely aware that our time in this altered reality was limited. The ease between us now felt both natural and dangerous, a connection that had developed too quickly to fully comprehend. Clearwater's legal team sent over preliminary paperwork, Nathan said, checking his phone. They want to move forward immediately. Your virtual pitch strategy saved the account. Our strategy, I corrected, warmed by his willingness to share credit. He looked up, his eyes meeting mine with unexpected intensity. You continue to surprise me, Megan Collins. Before I could respond, my own phone buzzed with a text from Diane, heard about your snow adventure. Office rumors flying. You okay? The message was a stark reminder of the world waiting for us, a world where our evolving relationship would be subject to scrutiny and speculation. I showed the text to Nathan, whose expression darkened. Already? He sighed. News travels fast. What do they think happened? I asked, suddenly anxious about my professional reputation. Nothing scandalous, he assured me. Just that we're stranded together. But office imagination tends to run wild. The reminder of our workplace reality created a subtle tension that hadn't existed minutes before. Nathan must have felt it too, because he reached across the table to briefly touch my hand. This doesn't change anything, he said quietly. We handled an unexpected situation professionally and successfully. That's all anyone needs to know. But it wasn't all there was to know. Something had shifted between us, something that couldn't be easily categorized or dismissed. The question was whether we could, or should, try to preserve it beyond our Wisconsin interlude. As we prepared to check out, gathering the makeshift presentation materials from our room, I found myself memorizing details: the way sunlight fell across the rumpled bedsheets, the lingering scent of Nathan's cologne, the comfortable silence we'd developed in such a short time. I feel like I should thank you, I said suddenly. Nathan looked up, puzzled. For what? For seeing something in me worth taking a chance on. For this opportunity. His expression softened in a way I'd never witnessed before our trip. You earned the opportunity, Megan. But I'm grateful for how it turned out, unexpected detours and all. The layered meaning in his words hung between us as we finished packing. Our rented SUV arrived just before noon, and soon we were on the road to Chicago, leaving the intimate confines of Pine Lake Lodge behind. The drive should have re-established our professional distance, a return to normal roles and boundaries. Instead, the privacy of the car created a new kind of intimacy. Nathan shared stories about his early career struggles, his divorce 5 years earlier, his passion for renovating vintage motorcycles, personal details I couldn't imagine him revealing in any office context. In return, I opened up about my family's disappointment in my career choice, my broken engagement during college, my secret dream of eventually starting my own boutique agency. The miles disappeared as we talked, our connection deepening with each revelation. As Chicago's skyline appeared on the horizon, Nathan's phone rang through the car's Bluetooth. It was James, asking about the Clearwater presentation. Complete success, Nathan reported, his professional persona sliding back into place effortlessly. Megan's performance was exemplary. In fact, I'm considering her for the new senior strategist position. The casual mention of a promotion, one I hadn't known was available, jolted me from our comfortable bubble. Was this Nathan's way of returning to our proper roles? Or something more complicated, an attempt to create a professional justification for our continued closeness? As we pulled into the hotel parking lot, the question lingered, unasked and unanswered. Our Wisconsin adventure was officially over, but its repercussions were just beginning. 3 days after returning to Chicago, we were still technically on our business trip, finalizing details with Clearwater's team. The professional success was undeniable. They'd signed a contract worth even more than our initial projections, but the personal dynamics had become increasingly complicated. Nathan and I maintained careful professionalism during business hours, our interaction indistinguishable from any boss-employee relationship. But each evening, we found reasons to extend our work sessions in his hotel suite, professional discussion gradually giving way to personal connection as the night progressed. We hadn't crossed any explicit physical boundaries since that impulsive hug after the virtual pitch, yet the emotional intimacy continued to deepen in ways that felt equally significant. It was as if our snow bubble agreement had mutated rather than dissolved, expanding to encompass Chicago as long as we remained away from the office. We should head back to New York tomorrow, Nathan said on our third evening, after we'd finished reviewing the final contract details. The Clearwater work can continue remotely. Though his tone was neutral, I understood the subtext immediately. Our unspoken extension of the Wisconsin arrangement had reached its limit. Reality needed to reassert itself before we crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed. Of course, I agreed, gathering my notes with deliberate focus. I'll book flights in the morning. A knock at the door interrupted the sudden tension. Nathan frowned. We weren't expecting anyone, but moved to answer it. Mark Terrence, Clearwater's marketing director, stood in the hallway, clearly several drinks into his evening. Holbrook. Thought I'd stop by to celebrate our partnership. Nathan's professional mask slipped seamlessly into place as he welcomed Mark inside, though I caught the brief flicker of frustration in his eyes. Mark's gaze landed on me, then swept over the room, the scattered papers, the remnants of room service dinner, my obvious comfort in Nathan's suite. "Hope I'm not interrupting," Mark said, a knowing edge to his voice. "Not at all," Nathan replied smoothly. "Megan and I were just finishing the implementation timeline." Mark's expression made it clear he didn't entirely believe this explanation, but he didn't press further. Instead, he launched into an enthusiastic monologue about potential expansion of our campaign into international markets. As the conversation continued, I maintained my professional demeanor while inwardly processing how our situation must appear to an outsider. The obvious comfort between us, the late-hour work session in a hotel suite, it told a story that wasn't technically accurate but wasn't entirely false either. When my phone buzzed with a text from Diane, Mark Terrence bragging at hotel bar about crashing Holbrook's romantic evening. Please tell me he's delusional. I realized how quickly perception could outpace reality. I showed Nathan the text when Mark stepped into the bathroom. His expression darkened. "This stops now," he said quietly. "I'm booking us on the first flight tomorrow." The decisiveness in his voice felt like a door closing, necessary but painful nonetheless. Whatever had been developing between us was too fragile to withstand external scrutiny, too complicated to navigate alongside our professional relationship. When Mark re-emerged, Nathan smoothly wrapped up the conversation, citing an early flight as reason for ending the impromptu meeting. As Mark left, his parting comment lingered uncomfortably. "Don't worry, what happens on business trips stays there, right?" He winked at Nathan. "Been there myself." The insinuation hung in the air after the door closed. Nathan ran a hand through his hair, that familiar stress gesture I now recognized so well. "I'm sorry about that," he said finally. Mark's implications were inappropriate and unprofessional. "But predictable," I added softly. "This is exactly why we agreed to maintain boundaries." Nathan nodded, his expression unreadable. "Get some rest, Megan. I'll handle the flight arrangements." As I gathered my things to return to my own room, the professional distance between us seemed to expand with each passing second. The emotional intimacy of Wisconsin and our first days in Chicago was receding, replaced by the cautious formality of boss and employee. At the door, I hesitated, searching for words to bridge the growing gap. But Nathan had already turned away, phone in hand, his focus deliberately elsewhere. Reality, it seemed, had finally caught up with us. The office felt strange after our trip, familiar yet somehow different, as if I was seeing it through new eyes. Colleagues greeted me with knowing smiles and curious glances, the rumor mill clearly active despite our careful professionalism in Chicago. "Spill everything," Zoe demanded the moment I settled at my desk. 5 days stranded with Holbrook? That's either a horror story or, she let the implication hang, her raised eyebrow saying more than words could. "It was professional," I said firmly. "We adapted to the situation, secured the Clearwater account, and returned." End of story. Zoe looked disappointed but didn't press further. Throughout the morning, similar interactions repeated with other colleagues, innocuous questions laden with subtext, fishing for gossip I refused to provide. Around noon, I was summoned to Diane's office. As the head of account management, she wasn't my direct supervisor, but her seniority and relationship with Nathan gave her unofficial authority. "Close the door," she said when I entered. Her expression was serious, concerned rather than accusatory. "We need to talk about what happened in Wisconsin and Chicago." "The Clearwater pitch was successful despite the weather challenges," I began, clinging to professional talking points. Diane waved this away impatiently. "I'm not talking about Clearwater. I'm talking about you and Nathan." My carefully neutral expression must have slipped because Diane's eyes narrowed slightly. "So there is something to talk about." "Nothing inappropriate happened," I said carefully. "But something happened," she pressed. Megan, I've known Nathan for 15 years. I can see the difference in how he looks at you now. The observation sent an unwelcome flutter through me. I'd been so focused on controlling my own behavior that I hadn't considered how Nathan's might have changed. Whatever you think you see, there's nothing unprofessional in our working relationship, I insisted. Diane studied me for a long moment. Nathan's last assistant was transferred after developing feelings for him. The one before that quit because of the pressure. Being in his orbit is complicated, especially for women. The revelation felt like a bucket of ice water. Were there incidents? I asked hesitantly. No, Diane clarified. Nathan has always maintained boundaries. But proximity creates connection, and connection leads to complications. I appreciate your concern, I said stiffly, but I'm capable of maintaining professional boundaries. Diane's expression softened. I'm sure you believe that. Just be careful. Office relationships rarely end well, especially when there's a power differential. I left her office unsettled, her warnings echoing uncomfortably with my own misgivings. Had Wisconsin been a unique circumstance, or was I following a pattern I hadn't recognized? My phone buzzed with a meeting request from Nathan, my first direct contact with him since our return. The neutral subject line, Clearwater implementation, gave no hint of his mindset. When I entered his office at the appointed time, the contrast with our hotel interactions was jarring. Gone was the relaxed, open man I'd come to know. In his place sat the Nathan Holbrook I'd worked under for 11 months, professional, slightly distant, firmly in charge. Megan, he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk rather than the more informal seating area. Thank you for your excellent work on the Clearwater account. As discussed in Chicago, I'd like to recommend you for the senior strategist position that's opening next month. The formal praise and professional opportunity should have thrilled me. Instead, I felt a confusing disappointment at the clear message he was sending. We were back to our original roles, the connection we'd developed carefully excised from our working relationship. Thank you, I replied, matching his professional tone. I appreciate the opportunity. For a brief moment, something flickered in his eyes, regret. Uncertainty? But it disappeared so quickly I might have imagined it. There's one complication, he continued. The position would move you from my team to Director Burton's division. You'd no longer report directly to me. The implication was clear, he was creating professional distance between us. The question was whether his motivation was proper management practice or something more personal. I understand, I said carefully. Would you prefer I pursue a different opportunity? I think it's the logical next step for your career progression, he replied, sidestepping the personal aspect entirely. As our meeting continued in this carefully choreographed professional dance, I realized that external pressure had accomplished what our own resolutions had not, forcing us firmly back into our proper roles, regardless of the connection we'd discovered in Wisconsin. The question was whether those roles would hold over time, or if what had begun in that snowbound lodge had merely been temporarily contained rather than truly resolved. The hotel room felt smaller now, as if the walls were closing in around us. I stood by the window, watching as the last of the snow melted from the roads. We could finally leave tomorrow. Megan, we need to discuss what happens when we get back, Nathan said, his voice breaking the uneasy silence that had settled between us. I turned to face him, my heart racing. I know. I think we should be upfront about this, he said, running a hand through his dark hair. I don't want to sneak around. We could disclose our relationship to HR, follow the proper protocols. His words hit me like a bucket of ice water. Are you serious? Do you have any idea what that would do to my career? Nathan's expression hardened. What exactly are you implying? You're the boss, Nathan. You'll be fine. They'll just make you sign some paperwork. But me? I'll be the employee who slept with her boss to get ahead. The words tasted bitter as I spoke them. That's not fair. You know that's not what this is. I laughed without humor. It doesn't matter what it is. It matters what people will think it is. Nathan sat heavily on the edge of the bed. This isn't my first office relationship, you know. The revelation hung in the air between us. What happened? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. It ended badly. She was in accounting. After we broke up, she left the company. Couldn't handle seeing me every day. Did she leave, or was she pushed out? The question was sharper than I intended. His hesitation told me everything I needed to know. Look, it's different this time. I'm in a position to protect you, he said. That's exactly the problem, Nathan. The fact that you think I need your protection proves my point. The power imbalance is real, whether we acknowledge it or not. We argued late into the night, voices rising and falling like the tide. Every solution he offered seemed to minimize my concerns, and every objection I raised seemed to frustrate him further. What do you want from me, Megan? He finally asked, exasperated. To pretend this never happened when we go back? I stared at him, the man who had held me so tenderly just the night before, now suddenly a stranger. Maybe that would be for the best. His face fell. I don't believe you mean that. I've worked too hard to get where I am, I said, my voice breaking. I can't be known as the girl who slept with the boss on a business trip. I won't. So your career matters more than what we might have together? The question hung between us, impossible to answer without hurting one of us. My career is certain, I finally said. What we have, that's just a few days in a snowstorm. Nathan stood and walked to the door. I need some air, he said, not looking back as he left. I sank to the floor, tears streaming down my face. How had something that felt so right become so complicated so quickly? The worst part was that I still wanted him, even as I knew I needed to protect myself. Outside, the roads were finally clear, but the path forward had never seemed more uncertain. The office felt different when we returned. Conversations stopped when I walked by, replaced by knowing glances and whispered comments. Nathan and I had barely spoken on the flight home, the tension between us thick enough to cut with a knife. There she is. Jen, my closest work friend, rushed over to my desk. Everyone's been talking about your extended trip with Nathan. What really happened out there? The meetings got rescheduled because of the storm, I said, the practiced explanation sounding hollow even to my own ears. Right, she said, unconvinced. And you two being the only ones from our office who went has nothing to do with the rumors. My stomach dropped. What rumors? Before she could answer, Rachel from accounting approached, her smile sharp as a knife. Welcome back, Megan. Must have been quite the trip. Nathan seems different since your return. The implication in her tone was unmistakable. It was a business trip, Rachel. Nothing more, I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. She leaned closer. That's not what the expense reports suggest. One hotel suite? For 4 nights? How economical. My face burned as she walked away. How did she know about the room situation? An email popped up on my screen. Please report to HR at 2 p.m. regarding your recent business expenses. The hours until the meeting crawled by. When I finally entered the HR office, my heart sank further. Nathan was already there, sitting stiffly beside Marcus from HR. Megan, please have a seat, Marcus said. We're reviewing the expenses from your trip with Nathan. Is there a problem? I asked, avoiding Nathan's gaze. Several charges seem unusual. The single suite, room service for 2, the extended stay beyond the original business purpose. Nathan cleared his throat. I can explain all of that. The town had limited accommodation options due to the storm. I see, Marcus said, his expression neutral. And the champagne charge to the room? Nathan's jaw tightened. That was my personal celebration for closing the Henderson deal remotely. The lies were piling up, each one making me feel smaller. As we left the meeting, Nathan caught my arm. We need to talk. This is getting out of hand. Before I could respond, a company-wide email arrived announcing an emergency all-hands meeting. We filed into the conference room with everyone else, the tension palpable. CEO Richard Williams stood at the front, his expression grave. I've called this meeting to announce some organizational changes. Nathan has proposed a major restructuring of the marketing department. My eyes snapped to Nathan, who wouldn't meet my gaze. Effective immediately, Nathan will be relocating to our London office to head up international operations. The room erupted in whispers. London? My mind reeled. Additionally, Richard continued, I'd like to announce that Megan will be taking over as head of domestic marketing, reporting directly to me. All eyes turned to me. A promotion? Now? The timing couldn't have been worse. As the meeting dispersed, Rachel appeared beside me. Well. Sleep with the boss, get a promotion, and he conveniently transfers overseas. How tidy. Her words carried, heads turning our way. Nathan stepped forward. That's enough, Rachel. Is she wrong? Someone asked from the crowd. The silence that followed was deafening. 3 months had passed since that awful day in the conference room. Nathan was settled in London now, running international operations with his typical efficiency. My promotion had become official after a series of interviews with Richard to prove I was qualified, his way of quelling the rumors, I supposed. I stood by the window of my new office, still nowhere near as large as Nathan's had been, but a significant upgrade from my cubicle. The view of the city was particularly beautiful today, the sun breaking through clouds after a morning rain. Package for you, Jen said, placing a small box on my desk. I waited until she left to open it. Inside was a snow globe containing a tiny hotel remarkably similar to the one Nathan and I had stayed in. No note, but I knew who it was from. My phone buzzed with a text from a UK number I didn't recognize. Proud of what you've accomplished. It was always about your talent, never about us. And I set the phone down, emotions washing over me in waves. The past months had been a crash course in office politics, professional boundaries, and personal growth. The rumors had eventually faded as I proved myself in the role day after day. Richard poked his head in. Quarterly numbers look great, Megan. The Henderson campaign exceeded expectations. Nathan made the right call recommending you. Thank you, sir, I replied, the irony not lost on me. After he left, I pulled out the letter I'd been drafting for days. It was addressed to Nathan, my thoughts finally organized enough to put into words. What happened between us was real, I wrote. But so were the consequences. I've learned that professional and personal lines aren't just arbitrary rules, they exist because relationships have power dynamics that can't be ignored. I paused, considering my next words carefully. I don't regret what happened, but I regret how it happened. I regret not being strong enough to wait until we could meet as equals. Outside my office, I could see my team working, people who now looked to me for leadership. The responsibility felt both heavy and right. My mother once told me that sometimes we have to lose something valuable to gain something priceless. The experience with you cost me some innocence about workplace relationships, but it gave me clarity about my worth and capabilities. I finished the letter, signing it simply with my name. Whether I would send it remained uncertain, but writing it had been cathartic. That evening, as I prepared to leave, Richard stopped by again. London office is having issues with the European campaign. I need someone to fly out there tomorrow to straighten things out. My heart skipped. You want me to go to London? You're the best person for the job, he said simply. Think you can handle working with Nathan again? Strictly professional, of course. I thought about the snow globe, the letter in my desk, the lessons learned. Yes, I said with newfound confidence. I can handle it. As I walked to my car, I realized the journey that had begun with that unexpected invitation had come full circle. The difference was that I wasn't the same person who had left on that trip months ago. I was stronger now, clearer about my boundaries and my worth. Tomorrow I would see Nathan again, not as his subordinate or his secret, but as his professional equal. Whatever happened next would be on new terms, my terms. Sometimes the most important business trips are the ones where you never make it to the meeting. Because the real destination turns out to be a better understanding of yourself.